So, Amy, today we're going to be talking about the post 9/11 GI Bill. The GI Bill is an awesome benefit available to service members who have served after September 11th, 2001. Like previous versions of the GI Bill that helped the middle class build into what it is today, post GI Bill provides money for tuition, fees, housing allowance, and money for books and supplies for military members who and veterans who want to get an advanced degree.
Now, unlike previous versions of the GI Bill, the post 9/11 GI Bill can also be transferred to the military member's spouse or their children. So, in this episode, we'll talk about the basics of the post 9/11 GI Bill and how transferring it works. And in part two, we'll talk about the best ways to use the GI Bill to get the most value you can.
Welcome to Operation Retirement Readiness, where Amy and Mike, two certified financial planners, talk about how military members can prepare for transition and how veterans can prepare for ultimate retirement. This podcast represents the views of the hosts and any guest. It is for informational purposes only and should not be considered tax, financial, or legal advice. All information is regarded to be from reliable sources. The hosts are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast. This podcast is not intended to replace professional advice.
So, Amy, let's start with a little history. The GI Bill has been around for a while. It was originally known as the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944. It was specifically designed to help service members returning from World War II adjust back to their civilian life. The country didn't want to find itself in a situation like after World War I, where a lot of those veterans had a real hard time adjusting. There were no benefits. And that original GI Bill was in place until 1956. And in that, 12 or so years, over 7.8 million veterans used their benefits, and over 2.2 million of them went to college or university.
That's super interesting history. I actually didn't know that. But to continue the story, in 1984, the Montgomery GI Bill was instituted. And this allowed service members to pay $100 per month for 12 months in exchange for receiving education benefits. This was the primary GI Bill until 2008, when the post 9/11 GI Bill was passed. So some members may still have the Montgomery GI Bill benefits, but we're going to focus on the post 9/11 GI Bill because that's what the majority of service members have today or are using. So, Mike, why don't you kick us off with some basics around post 9/11 GI Bill?
Sure. And since we did a little history, talked about a few others, and the Montgomery GI Bill is still kind of out there kicking around for some veterans who joined a long time ago. When we refer to the GI Bill now going forward, we're talking about the post 9/11 GI Bill. Does that sound good? Instead of having to say post 9/11 every time.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So, okay, the basics. So, as I referenced, the GI Bill covers tuition and fees, a housing allowance, subject to a few limitations we'll talk about, a book and supply allowance, and potentially money to move if you live in a very rural area. Now, there are nuances to all these, and that's what we'll kind of break down in this episode. But you want to hit the tuition and fees? Is there any limit to what the GI Bill will cover? I mean, what we're about to see colleges hit the $100,000 mark per year, which is just crazy. So can I go anywhere?
So GI Bill does have a limit on tuition and fees. VA covers the full cost of public in-state tuition and fees. And so that means it varies state by state. So some states have cheaper in-state tuition. So it depends on which state you're going to go to school in. That doesn't mean that you only can go to a public school in your state. It just means that it's the maximum that the VA will pay. So, for example, Mike, you're in Missouri. And your daughter's getting ready to go off to school here pretty soon. If your daughter wanted to go to the University of Missouri in Columbia, as an example, tuition will be covered. But if she wanted to go to Washington University in St. Louis, that tuition is about $60,000 per year. So the VA would only pay up to $27,000 because that's the highest public school tuition for Missouri. So that means that you're still going to have to find $33,000 per year to send your daughter to Washington University versus University of Missouri.
Wow, that's still a lot of money. But the one nice thing is some schools do offer an additional option. They're called yellow ribbon schools, and they enter into an agreement with the VA where any additional money they want to put toward that, the VA will match kind of dollar for dollar. So, and that can be a limited amount. Some schools do maybe $5,000 at a time. Others do a lot more, but let's say it's a full tuition. So in this case, if WashU said, yes, we want to be a full tuition yellow ribbon school, they'd pay about $16,500, half of that. The VA would match it. And again, this varies by school. As I said, some schools, it may be a couple $1,000s that you get extra to apply to that. But other schools do meet full private tuition. And we'll put it in the show notes, but the VA has a site that explains exactly, if a school is a yellow ribbon school, what they offer. And one of the other limitations schools can sometimes put on it is they may not give, they may have a limited number of yellow ribbon scholarships that they give out. So you'll want to investigate that. If you are considering a yellow ribbon school, understand, how much more money you could be getting, and are there any limitations on how many of those they actually give out. Uh, Anything else I missed or we missed on the tuition and fees?
I don't think so. Just, to foot stomp the yellow ribbon program and taking a look at the link that's going to be in the show notes to make sure you understand what's possible, what may not be possible, what's in play, what's not in play. So I think we're good on tuition and fees. What's next?
So another big expense of college is room and board. So you may be thinking, well, do I have to come up with that money? If tuition's covered. But are there any benefits around that?
There are, which is amazing. So as long as you're at least half time as defined by the school you're attending, you'll qualify for housing allowance. And the housing allowance is based on the zip code of where you take the majority of your classes at the E5 rate with dependents. And this housing allowance is tax-free, right, Mike?
It is. Two caveats. If you've transferred your GI Bill, which we'll talk some about, to your spouse, and you're still on active duty, your spouse will not get the housing allowance because you're already getting it as an active service member. Also, if you're taking online classes, you only get 50% of the national average housing allowance. So, just consider that when you're thinking about how you're going to attain your degree. If you're counting on the housing allowance in a more expensive area, but you want to make sure you've got at least, more than 50% of your class time in person.
Really good points. So how about the books and move allowances that you mentioned earlier?
So VA pays up to $1,000 or pays $8,000 a year stipend for books and other expenses. And the one-time move rate is for $500. Like I said, it doesn't apply to very many. It's if you have fewer than 6 people per capita in your county, you can potentially qualify. And then there's some additional things about whether you have to fly to the school or, you're able to drive. So less common, but if you live in a rural area, it's something to look into.
Now, when we talk about how long these benefits last, the VA allocates 36 months of benefits, assuming that you served at least 1,095 days or 36 months on active duty. If you serve less than that, then you might be eligible for a percentage of benefits. Now, back to the 36 months. That's not, that sounds like 3 years, right? 3 years for a degree. But just like other ways that VA math is different, VA pays benefits based on days and months. So most students go to school for 2 semesters a year, which is about 8 or 9 months. So that ends up allowing you to get a 4-year degree with a 36-month benefit. Does that make sense, Mike?
It does, yeah. Like you said, more VA math, like the disability benefits, but it actually works out, a little better potentially for students because a lot of the times the semester is somewhat less than using a full 9 months a year. You may use like 8.5 months, so you may end up with a little bit left over even when getting a 4-year degree. And as long as you have even a day left, if you start that semester, VA actually covers that whole semester. So it can be a good deal because you can squeeze out a little more either for another child or for somebody to, continue and maybe go to grad school. Yeah, we'll talk more about that next week when we talk about actually using the GI Bill and how the specific numbers of months and things break down. But one thing we need to hit is the amount of time you have to use it. So if you service ended before January 1st, 2013, you have 15 years to use your benefit. If your service ended after January 1st or on or after January 1st, 2013, your benefits don't expire. So you can, be 75-year-old freshman, going back to get your degree and use this benefit. One of the other amazing pieces of the post 9/11 GI Bill that's new that we kind of alluded to is that it can be transferred both to spouses and children as long as they're in DEERS as one of your dependents. You can make that transfer. There are some requirements to make the transfer. How long you've served, and we'll get into that. So, it's fantastic because a lot of times service members that stay a long time end up the military actually pays for degrees as they go along. So they may not have a use for it. So this was seen as kind of a key retention tool to helping to keep folks in longer and just give them that benefit as something they can use for their family.
And it is a really great benefit. I'm using it right now for my daughter and soon my son, and I know you're getting ready to use it soon as your daughter heads to school in the fall. Now, there are some requirements for transferring the GI Bill to your spouse or child. And the most important thing to realize is that DoD, so GI Bill is a VA benefit, but DoD determines who can transfer the benefits and what the requirements are. And this is because transfers are intended to be a retention tool. So they come with some requirements, and here are the requirements. So you have to be on active duty or in the selected reserve. And you had to have completed at least 6 years of service on the date your request is approved. And you agree to add 4 more years of service. And the person getting benefits is already enrolled in DEERS, so the Defense Enrollment Eligibility Reporting System. Now, there's a caveat. If you received a Purple Heart, you don't have to meet the service requirement, but you need to request to transfer your benefits while you're still on active duty.
Yeah, so basically, you're committing to at least 10 years of service in the military to fully get this benefit. Now, the transfer doesn't have to happen exactly at 6 years if you're still kind of on the fence of whether you're going to stay in, and you get to the 10 or even 12-year point and decide, I'm going to make it a career, I'm going to stay the 20. You can initiate the transfer there, but that's when that 4 years additional active duty service commitment would kick in. So, it doesn't have to be right away. Now, if hey, this is something I want to use and I'll do at least 10 years, yeah, start it right at the 6 year point.
Good point. And I'll point out that, don't wait. So once you get to your 6 years, if you're still on the fence, you can certainly take your time and think about it, but don't forget about it. And then the other thing is that, at least in years past, if you made the transfer and then you choose to get out, they just make you transfer it back. And then once you're transferred back, then they'll approve your separation paperwork so you can get out. That may have changed, so double check on that. But Mike, when can beneficiaries use the benefits?
So as soon as you transfer them, and like the military benefits, if you've separated before January 1st, 2013, they have the same 15 years to use them. If you've separated after, they never expire. The spouses would never expire. For children, again, the member must have served that full 10 years or gotten through that service commitment before the children can start using them. They can use the benefits whether you're on active duty or after you're separated, and their requirements are really based on age. They can't use the benefits unless they've gotten either a high school diploma or turned at least 18, and they must use the transferred GI Bill benefits before they turn 26 years old. So it's not, we talked a little bit, maybe you got a little bit left over, and they want to go to grad school. You got to keep that in mind, that clock is ticking and they need to do it before they turn 26. So, Amy, can you talk a little bit about some other things that we should think about when transferring benefits? And, can you change it? Is it locked in as soon as you make that allotment, and how all that works?
Sure. So the bottom line is you have control over the benefits until they're used. You're able to make transfers through the Mill Connect website while you're on active duty and after you're separated from active duty. Benefits are transferred by month. So you've got 36 months. Best practice has been that you transfer at least 1 month to anyone who might use them in the future. So you'd give a month to your spouse and a month to each of your children, as an example. So that's long been the best practice. And, for a while, if the service member died, no additional benefits could be transferred after they passed away. So if they'd only transferred 1 month to each child and then something happened, that's all the beneficiary would get. This has since been fixed, so beneficiaries can reallocate the benefit even if the service member dies. But all beneficiaries that you want to be able to use the some of your GI Bill must be given at least a month while the service member is on active duty for them to be able to use the benefit. So if you separate from active duty and then you have another child after you separate, they will not be able to have benefits transferred to them. And same if you don't transfer 1 month to one of your children for whatever reason before you leave active duty, they won't ever be able to have benefits transferred to them.
Good info. Yeah. Super flexible. Again, if you give them to the kids and then they decide, yeah, they're not gonna, they're gonna enlist and not go to college, it's flexible. You can pull it back to yourself or your spouse. Awesome opportunities there. Amy, anything we kind of missed on the basics of the GI Bill and the transfer stuff and anything else that we need to hit as kind of the primer before we talk about, how do you actually go about using it and what are kind of the best practices in those areas?
I think we covered the basics pretty well, and I'm looking forward to getting into the meat and potatoes of how to use the GI Bill to max benefit for families.
Yeah, a lot of good planning opportunities around that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about that in our next episode also. So, um, well, it was great to chat with you today about the GI Bill and give people some basics and a little bit of history of how the GI Bill came about. But yeah, I look forward to talking with you next time.
Sounds good, Mike. Talk to you again soon.
To get transcripts, show notes, or more information, go to operationretirementreadiness.com. Have a question or topic for the podcast? Send it to info@operationretirementreadiness.com. Find out more about Amy and Mike at their websites. Mike is the founder of Next Mission Financial Planning, LLC. He retired from the U.S. Air Force and has worked in the financial services sector since 2021. He is a certified financial planner, chartered financial consultant, and a certified college financial consultant. You can find out more about Mike at nextmissionfinancialplanning.com. Amy is the founder of Instar Financial Planning, LLC. She is retired from the U.S. Army and has worked in the financial services sector since 2019. She's a certified financial planner, a chartered federal employee benefits counselor, and a chartered retirement planning counselor. You can find out more about Amy at instarfp.com.